I think I didn't do anything wrong, just played a silly game. One kiss, everyone laughed, and it meant nothing. That's why I was so shocked when my husband served me divorce papers in front of our families, claiming I'd cheated, all over a dare and a misunderstanding, or at least, that's how I see it. It started on what should have been a perfectly normal Friday night at our favorite gastropub. I'm Rowena Greaves, 32, and I work as an insurance claims adjuster. A job that requires me to be sharp, persuasive, and good at reading people. My husband Elliot teaches high school math and has always been the quieter type, content to sit back while I handle our social life. That evening, our usual group was there: Emma and Jordan, Tara and Greg, and our neighbor Vince Callow. Vince had been Elliot's friend since college, though lately I'd noticed how much more interesting his conversations were compared to Elliot's endless talk about lesson plans and grading papers. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The atmosphere was lively, drinks were flowing, and everyone was in high spirits. Well, everyone except Elliot, who kept giving me these looks every time I laughed at Vince's jokes or touched his arm during conversation. It was embarrassing, honestly. Here I was, trying to be the fun, engaging wife, and my husband was acting like some jealous teenager. "Elliot, you're being ridiculous," I whispered when he pulled me aside near the bar. "Vince is your friend. I'm just being friendly." "Friendly?" Elliot's voice was tight. "Rowena, you're practically sitting in his lap. People are starting to notice." I rolled my eyes. "You're being paranoid and insecure. It's not a good look." When we returned to the table, I made sure to address the group loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Sorry about that, everyone. Elliot's just feeling a bit paranoid tonight. Thinks I'm being too friendly with you, Vince." I laughed, and thankfully, most of the group laughed with me. "Oh, come on, Elliot," Emma chimed in. "Rowena's just being herself. You know she's the life of the party." Vince looked uncomfortable, which I found oddly endearing. "Maybe we should—" No, I interrupted, feeling emboldened by the group's support. "If Elliot thinks I'm being inappropriate, maybe we should play a game to prove how silly he's being. Truth or dare, anyone?" The suggestion was met with enthusiastic agreement from everyone except Elliot, who sat back with his arms crossed. Even my mother Helen, who was visiting for the weekend and had joined us, seemed amused by the idea. "I haven't played that since college," Tara giggled. "I'm in." The game started innocently enough. Jordan had to text his ex-girlfriend a random emoji. Emma had to admit her most embarrassing moment from work. When it came to my turn, I chose dare without hesitation. "I dare you," Greg said with a mischievous grin, "to kiss the person at this table who isn't your husband that you find most attractive." The table erupted in laughter and encouraging shouts. I could feel Elliot's eyes boring into me, but I was determined to prove his jealousy was unfounded. It was just a game, after all. "Fine," I said, standing up with theatrical flair, "but this is just to prove how ridiculous Elliot's being about innocent fun between friends." I walked around the table to where Vince was sitting. He looked up at me with wide eyes, clearly uncomfortable but not stopping me. I leaned down and kissed him. Not a peck on the cheek, but a real kiss on the lips that lasted several seconds. The table cheered, and someone definitely had their phone out recording. When I pulled away, I turned to Elliot with a triumphant smile. "See? Just a game. No big deal." But Elliot wasn't smiling. His face had gone completely pale, and he was already standing, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "Elliot, where are you going?" I called after him as he headed for the door. "Home," he said without turning around. "Enjoy your game." The table fell silent for a moment before Emma broke the tension. "He'll get over it. He's just being too sensitive." "Exactly," I agreed, settling back into my seat. "He needs to learn to lighten up. We're all adults here." My mother Helen looked concerned but didn't say anything. Vince excused himself shortly after, claiming he needed to get home to his own wife. The rest of us continued the evening, though the mood had definitely shifted. The next morning, I woke up to find Elliot already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with his phone. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Morning," I said cheerfully, hoping to move past the previous night's drama. "Coffee?" He held up his phone without looking at me. "Did you know Emma posted that kiss on her Instagram story?" My stomach dropped slightly, but I maintained my composure. "So, it's just friends having fun. Anyone who sees it will know it was just a silly dare." "My coworker Jake texted me this morning," Elliot continued, his voice eerily calm. "Saw your wife last night. Wow." That's what he said. "Wow, Rowena." I set down my coffee mug harder than necessary. "You're overreacting. Again. It was a dare, Elliot. A game. If you can't handle your wife being social and fun, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Our 7-year-old daughter Lucy wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Why are you and Daddy talking loud?" "We're not talking loud, sweetheart," I said, shooting Elliot a warning look. "Daddy's just being grumpy this morning. Why don't you go watch cartoons while I make breakfast?" After Lucy left, Elliot stood up slowly. "We need to talk about this seriously, Rowena. What happened last night? It wasn't okay." "What wasn't okay was you embarrassing me in front of our friends by acting like a jealous child," I shot back. "Everyone thinks you're being ridiculous, by the way. Even my mother said you overreacted." That wasn't entirely true. My mother had actually looked quite uncomfortable. But I needed Elliot to understand how isolated his position was. The conversation ended with Elliot leaving for his Saturday morning run, and me feeling justified in my stance. It really had been just a game, and if he couldn't see that, it was his problem to work through. Monday morning at the insurance office brought exactly what I'd expected: curious looks and whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. Word travels fast in our small town, especially when it involves someone kissing someone else's husband at the local pub. "Rowena!" My colleague Sarah approached my desk with barely contained excitement. "I heard you had quite the eventful weekend." I laughed it off with practiced ease. "Oh, that. Just a silly dare game. You know how these things get blown out of proportion." "Well, I think it's great that you're still fun and spontaneous," Sarah said. "Some married couples get so boring." "Exactly. That's what I keep trying to tell Elliot. We're not dead just because we've been married 8 years. But even as I maintained this confident front at work, things at home were becoming increasingly tense. Elliot had barely spoken to me since Saturday, responding to my attempts at conversation with one-word answers or silence. When I tried to bring up normal household topics, Lucy's school schedule, weekend plans, bills that needed paying, he handled them with cold efficiency. Tuesday evening, I decided to address the situation head-on. Lucy was at her friend's house for a playdate, giving us privacy to hash things out. "Elliot, this silent treatment needs to stop," I said, finding him grading papers at the kitchen table. "You're being childish." He looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder. "I'm not giving you the silent treatment, Rowena. I just don't have much to say right now." "Because of Friday night? Because of a stupid dare?" "Because of how you handled Friday night," he corrected, "and how you've handled everything since." I sat down across from him, adopting the patient tone I used with difficult insurance claimants. "Okay, let's talk about it then. What exactly is your problem with what happened?" "My problem is that my wife kissed another man in front of a room full of people, including my colleagues and your mother, and then acted like I was crazy for being upset about it. It was a dare, Elliot. A game. Everyone understood that." "Did they? Because Jake from work seemed to think it was pretty hot, and I've had 3 different people ask me if everything's okay at home." I felt a flash of irritation. "So now you're worried about what people think? I thought you didn't care about social opinions." "I don't care about social opinions. I care about my wife's respect for our marriage." "Oh, please." I stood up, pacing to the window. "You're being dramatic. If our marriage can't handle one silly kiss during a game, maybe it's not as strong as I thought." The words hung in the air between us, and I immediately regretted them. But instead of backing down, I doubled down. "Look, I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt, but I'm not going to apologize for being fun and social. That's who I am, Elliot. That's who you married." "No, he said quietly, closing his gradebook. The woman I married would never have humiliated me like that, and she definitely wouldn't have spent the last 4 days telling me I'm crazy for having feelings about it. That stung because it felt unfair. I wasn't telling him he was crazy. I was just trying to help him see reason. Wednesday brought a new challenge when Elliot's mother Penny called me at work. "Rowena, dear, I think we need to have a conversation." Penny had always been polite to me, but we'd never been particularly close. She was protective of Elliot in a way that sometimes felt like criticism of me, though she'd never said anything directly. "Of course, Penny, what's on your mind?" "I heard about what happened at the pub on Friday. Elliot's quite upset." I took a deep breath, preparing to give her the same explanation I'd been giving everyone else. "It was just a silly dare, Penny. A game between friends. I think Elliot's blowing it out of proportion." There was a long pause. "Rowena, I've been married for 40 years. I've played plenty of games and been to plenty of parties, but I've never kissed another man in front of my husband and our friends. Times were different then. Times weren't different. Respect was the same then as it is now." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "I'm not calling to lecture you, dear. I'm calling because I love my son and I love Lucy, and I can see this is heading somewhere painful for everyone." After she hung up, I sat at my desk feeling unsettled. Penny's words echoed in my head, but I pushed them away. She was from a different generation, one where women were expected to be meek and submissive. I wasn't going to let anyone, not Elliot, not his mother, make me feel guilty for being confident and fun. That evening, I decided to take control of the narrative. I posted a photo from Friday night on Facebook, one from earlier in the evening before the game, showing our whole group laughing and having drinks. "Missing nights out with this amazing group," I captioned it. "Nothing better than friends who know how to have fun without taking life too seriously. Ni on, blessed onche friendship, car, good times." The post got plenty of likes and supportive comments from friends who'd been there and others who hadn't. Emma commented, "Best group ever. Some people just don't know how to have fun." When Elliot came home from his evening tutoring session, I showed him the post proudly. "See, this is how normal people see Friday night, as friends having fun." He glanced at my phone screen and shook his head. "You're incredible, Rowena. You really are." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're so determined to be right about this that you're willing to keep humiliating both of us publicly rather than just admit you made a mistake." "I didn't make a mistake." The words came, out louder than I intended, and we both glanced toward the stairs where Lucy was presumably doing homework. "Daddy," Lucy's voice called down, "are you and Mummy fighting?" "No, sweetheart," I called back quickly. "We're just talking. Daddy gets grumpy sometimes, but everything's fine." I saw something change in Elliot's face when I said that, a kind of resignation that worried me more than his anger had. Thursday evening, I came home from work to find Vince's car in our driveway. My heart did a little skip, though I told myself it was just because I was curious about what he and Elliot were discussing. I found them in the kitchen, but the conversation stopped abruptly when I walked in. Vince looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes, while Elliot's expression was unreadable. "Hey, Vince," I said brightly. "What brings you by?" "Just talking to Elliot about Friday," he mumbled. "I should probably get going." "Oh, don't leave on my account," I said, moving to the refrigerator to get a drink. "We're all adults here. Surely we can discuss one silly kiss without it being weird." Vince shifted uncomfortably. "Rowena, I think maybe... I'm sorry if..." "If what? If we played a harmless game? Don't be ridiculous." I laughed, but it sounded forced even to me. "You have nothing to apologize for." After Vince left, Elliot and I stood in the kitchen in heavy silence. I could feel something building between us, some kind of confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. "What did you two talk about?" I asked finally. He wanted to apologize. To both of us. "For what? Playing a game?" "For kissing my wife," Elliot said simply, "because he knows it was wrong, even if you don't." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Elliot slept on his side of the bed, as far from me as possible without falling off. For the first time since Friday, I allowed myself to really think about what had happened. Had I gone too far? The kiss had lasted longer than necessary for a simple dare, and Vince had looked uncomfortable, not playful. But admitting that now would mean admitting that Elliot had been right all along, and I wasn't ready to do that. Instead, I convinced myself that everyone else was overreacting. Marriage required trust and security, and if Elliot couldn't handle his wife being social and confident, that was something he needed to work on, not me. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how much worse things were about to get. By the following weekend, I'd convinced myself that the whole situation was blowing over. Elliot seemed to be coming out of his funk, engaging more with Lucy and even asking about my work week. I took this as a sign that he was finally seeing reason about the whole pub incident. I was thinking we should have everyone over for dinner this Saturday, I suggested Thursday morning over coffee. It's been too long since we hosted, and it might be good to get back to normal. Elliot looked up from his newspaper with an expression I couldn't quite read. Normal? You know what I mean. Fun, social, the way we used to be before. I gestured vaguely, not wanting to rehash the pub incident again. Before you kissed Vince, I sighed. Before everyone got weird about a harmless game. Come on, Elliot. We can't let one silly night ruin all our friendships. To my surprise, he agreed. Sure, Rowena. Let's have everyone over. I spent Friday preparing, excited to show everyone that the Greaves household was still the fun, welcoming place it had always been. I made Elliot's favorite lasagna, bought good wine, and even got Lucy a new puzzle to keep her occupied while the adults socialized. Saturday evening arrived with our usual group, Emma and Jordan, Tara and Greg, and yes, Vince. I'd specifically made sure to invite him, wanting to prove that there was no awkwardness between any of us. The evening started perfectly. Conversation flowed, everyone complimented the food, and the wine was a hit. I felt vindicated in my decision to push forward rather than let one incident define our social life. This is exactly what we needed, Emma said, raising her glass. Back to the good times. Absolutely, I agreed, shooting a meaningful look at Elliot. Some of us were getting a little too serious for a while there. It was Jordan who suggested we play games after dinner. Remember how fun last weekend was? We should do truth or dare again. I felt Elliot tense beside me, but I was determined not to let his discomfort ruin another evening. Great idea, I said enthusiastically, but maybe we can think of some new dares this time. The game started harmlessly enough, but I could sense an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there the previous week. Vince seemed particularly uncomfortable, barely participating and declining his turn when it came up. Come on, Vince, Tara teased. Don't be boring. I'm just not really in the mood for games tonight, he mumbled. Oh, please, I said, feeling emboldened by the wine and the group's energy. We're all friends here. What happened to spontaneous fun? I caught Elliot watching me with that same unreadable expression from earlier in the week, but I was determined to prove that I could be the fun, confident wife without crossing any lines. When my turn came around again, I chose dare without hesitation. I dare you, Greg said with a grin, to give the best compliment you can think of to the person here you find most interesting. It was a softer dare than the previous week, but I saw an opportunity to make a point. I stood up, walked over to Vince, and placed my hand on his shoulder. Vince, you're one of the most genuinely kind and intelligent men I know. Your wife is lucky to have you, and we're all lucky to have you as a friend. I leaned down and kissed his cheek, letting my hand linger on his shoulder, perhaps a moment longer than necessary. It was innocent enough, but I caught the way his eyes met mine, and I felt a little thrill at the attention. When I looked back at the group, I expected to see approving smiles. Instead, I found a mix of uncomfortable expressions and averted gazes. Even Emma looked uncertain. But it was Elliot's face that stopped me cold. He wasn't angry or hurt this time. He looked done. Completely, utterly done. I think I'm going to call it a night, he said quietly, standing up from the couch. Elliot, don't be ridiculous, I said, but my voice sounded shrill even to me. I complimented your friend. How is that a problem? It's not, he said simply. I'm just tired. You all have fun. He left the room, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs. The group sat in awkward silence for a moment before Emma tried to restart the conversation, but the mood was broken. Everyone left within the hour, making polite excuses about early mornings and babysitters. Vince was the first to go, barely making eye contact as he thanked me for dinner. When I went upstairs, I found Elliot in our bedroom, pulling clothes from his dresser and putting them into a duffel bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, though my heart was already sinking. "I'm going to stay at Mark's for a while." Mark was Elliot's older brother, who lived across town. They'd always been close, but Mark had never particularly warmed to me. I had a feeling he'd been waiting for something like this. "You're leaving? Over what happened tonight?" "Elliot, I complimented your friend." I kissed his cheek. "How is that?" "It's not about tonight, Rowena." His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been yelling. "It's about the pattern. It's about the fact that you can't seem to interact with Vince without making it something more than it should be. That's not true, isn't it? The flirting, the touching, the way you look at him. And when I try to talk to you about it, you make me feel like I'm crazy or controlling or jealous." I felt panic rising in my chest. "You are being jealous. Vince is your friend, our friend. I'm just being friendly." "No, Rowena. Friends don't act the way you've been acting. Wives don't act the way you've been acting." He zipped up the duffel bag and turned to face me. "I need some space to think. About us, about our marriage, about whether this is something we can work through." "You're abandoning your family over this?" I could hear my voice getting higher, more desperate. "What am I supposed to tell Lucy?" "Tell her the truth. That Mommy and Daddy need some time apart to figure things out." "I won't do that. I won't confuse and upset our daughter because you can't handle your wife being social." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. "Then tell her whatever you want, Rowena. You will anyway." He left that night, and I sat in our empty bedroom feeling like my world had tilted off its axis. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I was supposed to be the fun, confident wife that everyone admired. Elliot was supposed to appreciate that about me, not punish me for it. The next morning, Lucy asked where Daddy was, and I found myself doing exactly what Elliot had predicted. "Daddy's just staying at Uncle Mark's for a little while, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need space when they're feeling stressed." "Is Daddy mad at you?" Emma's smile faltered. "I don't think this is a midlife crisis, Rowena. He's really hurting." I grabbed a box of cereal I didn't need just to have something to do with my hands. "He's overreacting. Everyone's acting like I had an affair, and it was one stupid kiss during a dare. That's not cheating." "I know," Emma said gently, "but to him it felt like betrayal. And honestly, it looked bad to everyone." "Everyone?" The word came out sharper than I intended. She hesitated. "People talk, Rowena, especially in small towns. The video from the pub's been passed around. Some people think Elliot's being dignified by not saying more publicly." The air felt heavy. "So now I'm the villain in the group chat?" "Nobody's calling you that," she said, though her tone made it clear they didn't need to. Everyone had already decided where they stood. "I just think maybe you should reach out to him before lawyers get involved." I laughed, brittle and defensive. "He's the one who left. He should reach out to me." Emma sighed and touched my arm. "Maybe that's what got you here in the first place. You waiting for someone else to fix things." When she walked away, I stood in the aisle staring at my reflection in the freezer door, wondering when I'd become someone people pitied instead of admired. At home, the silence was unbearable. Lucy's laughter used to fill the rooms. Elliot's music used to hum softly from his office. Now, there was nothing but the sound of my own phone lighting up with messages I didn't want to read. Neighbors asking if I was okay, co-workers offering support, friends choosing sides in whispers. That night, Elliot texted, "I'll pick up Lucy at 9 a.m. for school drop-off. Please have her things ready. No greeting, no sign-off, just logistics." I typed out 3 different replies before finally deleting them all. Nothing I said could fix this. Not yet. As I set the phone down, one thought echoed in my head. Maybe Emma and my mother were right. Maybe Elliot hadn't overreacted. Maybe I had. But I couldn't admit that out loud, not yet, because if I did, I'd have to face the possibility that I'd been wrong all along, and that the collapse of my marriage wasn't something that happened to me. It was something I'd caused. Emma's guilt was the first crack in the wall I'd built around my version of events. "The dare game was my idea," she said, her voice shaky. "If I'd known it would cause all this drama—" "It's not your fault," I interrupted, brushing it off. "People are just overreacting to harmless fun." But she didn't look convinced. Maybe it wasn't harmless. The kiss looked real. "And you and Vince—" "The way we've been what?" I snapped. "Flirty," she said softly. "Even before that night." I laughed, defensive. "We're friends. We talk. We laugh. That's all." She gave me a sad little smile. Maybe Elliot saw something we didn't. After she left, I stood frozen in the cereal aisle, feeling the first tremor of doubt. If even Emma, who'd started the game, was questioning things, what did that say about how everyone else saw me? By the weekend, I decided to fight back. I hosted a girls' night, poured too much wine, and tried to reclaim control of the story. "I just don't understand how one silly dare turned into this," I said. "Elliot's acting like I committed a crime." Tara set down her glass carefully. "Rowena, it's not just the kiss. People noticed how close you and Vince have been for months." "Close? We're just friends," she finished. "Friends who text at midnight. Friends whose chemistry is obvious to everyone else." I wanted to argue, but the truth was starting to sting through my denial. When they left, the house felt hollow. Their words kept circling in my head. Emotional affair, chemistry, boundaries. I told myself they were exaggerating, but deep down, I knew I'd felt something when Vince smiled at me. I'd looked forward to his messages. I'd rehearsed what I'd say when I knew he'd be somewhere. The next morning, reality knocked. Literally. "Mrs. Greaves, Jennifer Walsh, Walsh and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your husband." My stomach dropped. "Regarding what?" "Mr. Greaves would like to arrange a meeting to discuss terms of a potential separation agreement." A lawyer. My husband had hired a lawyer. I called him immediately, but it went to voicemail. "Elliot, are you serious? A lawyer? You're going to destroy our family over this. Call me back." He didn't. 2 days later, the letter arrived. Legal stationery, cold language, irreconcilable differences arising from respondents' inappropriate relationship with a family friend. I read that line 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each one. Inappropriate relationship. For weeks I'd told myself everyone was overreacting, that Elliot was being jealous, my friends judgmental, the gossip unfair. But as I stared at those words, I finally let the truth sink in. Maybe they hadn't overreacted at all. Maybe I had. The letter from Elliot's lawyer shattered the illusion I'd been clinging to, that this was just a temporary separation, that he'd calm down, that we'd eventually laugh about the whole thing. Seeing petition for legal separation in bold type made it undeniable. This was real, and it wasn't going away. When I called Rebecca Martinez, my old work attorney, she didn't sugarcoat anything. "Rowena, I need you to be completely honest about your relationship with Vince. Texts, meetings, anything. If there's evidence of emotional intimacy, your husband's attorney will use it." "We're just friends," I said. "We talk sometimes. We have things in common. That's all." "Have you ever been alone with him?" I hesitated. "Once or twice. He stopped by to see Elliot, but Elliot wasn't home yet." "Did you tell your husband about those visits?" "No," I admitted, but there was nothing to hide. Rebecca sighed. "From a legal standpoint, that's still a boundary issue. Combined with the kiss at the pub, it supports his claim of marital misconduct." "Misconduct? It was a game." "It was public humiliation," she said flatly. "And from where the court stands, it wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the culmination of emotional infidelity." That word, infidelity, made my stomach twist. I texted Vince that afternoon, desperate to make sense of it. Can we talk? This is getting out of hand. His reply came quickly. I think it's best if we don't communicate right now. Just like that, he was gone. No defense, no explanation. His silence said everything. That evening, Lucy looked up from her drawing and asked, Mommy, is Daddy ever coming home? I don't know, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy are having some problems. Her next question gutted me. Is it because you kissed Mr. Vince? Hearing my 7-year-old say it out loud made me realize how far the damage had spread. Lucy, sometimes adults make bad choices, and sometimes those choices hurt people we love, even when we don't mean to. The next morning brought another envelope, Elliot's formal petition citing inappropriate conduct and requesting custody. I called him immediately. We need to talk, I said. Face to face. He was quiet for a long time. There's nothing left to say, Rowena. Yes, there is. You're throwing away 8 years over a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, he said calmly. You've been having an emotional affair, and when I tried to talk about it, you made me feel like I was crazy. That's gaslighting, Rowena. The word landed like a punch. I'd told myself I was just defending my independence, but the truth was harder. I'd dismissed, minimized, and humiliated him because admitting fault felt unbearable. Elliot, I said quietly, I'm sorry. I didn't see what I was doing. I believe you, he said, but it doesn't change what's happened. I can't keep living like this. After he hung up, I sat in the silence of our once shared home and finally stopped making excuses. Yes, I'd flirted with Vince. Yes, I'd crossed emotional lines. Yes, I'd made my husband question his own reality, and then blamed him for being insecure. For the first time, I didn't defend myself. I just sat with the truth. Because if there was any hope of salvaging the future, it had to start with admitting how I'd destroyed the past. The custody hearing was held on a grey November morning, 3 months since the night at the pub that shattered everything. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the courthouse reflection. No longer confident, no longer charming, just hollow and exhausted. Elliot sat across the aisle, calm and resolute, his attorney methodically arranging documents. I couldn't look at him for long without remembering the life we'd built. The home, the laughter, the quiet moments that I'd mistaken for boredom instead of peace. When the clerk called our case, Greaves versus Greaves, Judge Henley reviewed the file with practiced detachment. Mr. Greaves, you're requesting primary custody of your daughter based on concerns about the home environment, she said. His lawyer laid everything out with brutal clarity. Text messages with Vince, timestamps, photos, statements from Lucy's teacher. My own words, messages I'd once thought poetic, now read like confessions. Then came the video from the pub. The kiss, the laughter, my careless expression as the crowd cheered. And finally, Lucy's name. Her teacher had written that she'd become withdrawn, distracted, asking if her parents were getting divorced. Hearing that in open court broke something in me. When it was my turn, I stood trembling. Your Honor, I made terrible choices, I said. I hurt my husband and confused my daughter. I convinced myself it was harmless when it wasn't. The judge listened but didn't soften. Mrs. Greaves, your acknowledgement is appreciated, but actions matter more than apologies. This court must prioritize the child's well-being. She ruled for joint legal custody, primary physical custody to Elliot, and supervised visits for me, 3 months, to be reviewed later. Supervised, like I was a stranger who couldn't be trusted alone with her own child. Afterward, Elliot spoke quietly in the hallway. This isn't revenge, Rowena. It's what's best for Lucy. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. I know. I'm sorry. For all of it. He didn't argue. He just walked away. The first supervised visit was worse than I'd imagined. Lucy was polite, distant, watching me with wary curiosity. Did I do something wrong? She asked. No, sweetheart, I whispered. Mommy did. Driving home afterward, I passed the pub where it had all begun. It looked ordinary now, just another building. The destruction hadn't started there. It had started long before, with my refusal to see the line between harmless attention and betrayal. The road ahead was long: therapy, supervision, and months of proving I could be trusted again. Maybe I'd never be the wife Elliot loved, but if I worked hard enough, maybe I could still be the mother Lucy deserved. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start, and for the first time, that felt like enough. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.